My parents mocked my degree as useless trash and demanded I cover their $900 credit card bill. I said, maybe get a job? And left. One day later, their cards were declined at a restaurant with all their friends watching. I told them I couldn't help and suggested they get jobs instead. They were furious, and honestly, I was too. The next day, at a local diner, their cards were declined in front of all their friends. It was awkward, to say the least. I don't know if I'm right for what I did or if I should have helped them out. It's been a week since it happened, and I'm still processing everything. Am I wrong for standing up for myself? I never thought my degree would come between me and my family, but here we are. My name is Emily Tisdale, and I come from a quiet town in South Carolina. The kind of place where everyone knows your name, sometimes too well. Growing up here was fine, I guess. My parents, Harry and Joan, worked hard. My dad was a mechanic at a local shop, and my mom worked at the grocery store down the road. They weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable. I always thought things would stay that way. Simple. When I graduated high school, I went to the University of South Carolina to study psychology. I loved learning about people, their behaviors, what made them tick. It was my passion, even though I knew my parents didn't exactly get it. They thought my degree was impractical, but they didn't stop me. They didn't support it much, but they didn't actively oppose it either. Still, I knew they had their doubts. After graduating and coming back home, I got a part-time job as a counselor at a nonprofit organization in town. It wasn't the highest-paying job, but it felt right. I loved helping people, even if it meant making a little less money than I thought I would. My parents, though, weren't impressed. "Why are you working at that place?" my dad would ask, his voice always a little dismissive. "You've got that fancy degree now, and this is what you're doing with it?" I'd just shrug it off, trying not to let it get to me. But over time, it did. They didn't understand why I didn't just go out and find a big-paying job, climb the corporate ladder, and live a normal life like everyone else. But I wasn't like everyone else, and I didn't want to be. One evening, about 2 months ago, it all came to a head. I came home from work, exhausted as usual, and my parents were sitting at the kitchen table, looking more serious than I'd ever seen them. We need to talk," my mom said. Her voice was quieter than usual, almost nervous. It immediately put me on edge. "What's going on?" I asked, unsure if I was about to hear something serious or just another one of their usual complaints. "Sit down," my dad added, his voice firm. "We have a problem, and we need your help." I sat down, waiting for whatever was coming next. "We've got this bill, $900 on the credit card," my mom started, looking down at the table as though ashamed. "We can't pay it." "We were hoping." "Well, we were hoping you could cover it." My stomach dropped. I didn't know how to react. $900 wasn't a small amount of money, not for me, and not for them either. "Wait, what?" I asked, trying to process what they were asking of me. "I'm sorry, but how am I supposed to cover that? I barely make enough to cover my own bills, let alone yours." "It's not about that," my dad said, cutting me off. "You've got that fancy degree now. You should be able to help us out. This is what you're supposed to do when you have the means." My heart sank. My degree. That same degree they always belittled. The one they said was useless because I wasn't a doctor or lawyer. The one they mocked every chance they got. "I'm not your ATM, Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can't just give you money because you messed up. You both have jobs. Why can't you figure this out yourselves?" They stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "You don't understand," my mom said, her voice trembling. "We've been struggling, and we don't know what to do anymore. You're the only one we can turn to." "I get it, but that's not my problem," I said. "I'm not responsible for your bills. You need to take care of this on your own." "You think you're better than us now, don't you?" my dad said, his voice rising. "You're just too good to help your own parents." That hurt. But I wasn't going to let them guilt trip me into doing something I couldn't afford to do. I don't think I'm better than you, I replied, my voice starting to shake. I'm not your solution. Maybe if you didn't spend more than you could afford, don't you dare lecture us, my mom snapped, her face red with anger. You've got this degree, but you're no better than us. Just a waste of time. That stung like a slap in the face. All those years of studying, working hard to earn a degree I was proud of, and this is how they saw it? A waste of time? I couldn't let them talk to me like that anymore. I'm sorry, I said, standing up from the table. But I can't help you with this. You both need to take responsibility for your own lives. I turned and walked out of the house without looking back. I needed space. I needed to breathe. For the next few days, I didn't hear from them. I kept to myself, focusing on work and trying to stay out of the house. But I could feel the tension hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. My parents didn't reach out, but I knew they were angry. I didn't blame them entirely. They were frustrated, and I was the one who had said no. But they had to understand, I wasn't their bank. Then, just a week later, I got a text from my mom. She wanted to meet at the local diner. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to tell her to forget it, but another part of me wanted to at least hear what they had to say. I agreed to meet them, figuring it might be a chance to patch things up. When I walked into the diner, I saw them sitting at a booth with a group of their friends. It wasn't a coincidence. This was a small town, and my parents knew everyone. It wasn't just about dinner, it was about showing off, proving something. As I sat down, my mom gave me a strained smile. My dad just looked at me, his face tight with anger. You finally decided to show up, my dad muttered. I thought we were here to talk, I said, trying to keep the tension down. We are, my mom said, but her voice was tight. We've been thinking about what you said. And we still think you should help us out. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could get a word out, the waitress came over. She was young, maybe in her 20s, and she had a nervous look on her face as she approached the table. Excuse me, she said quietly, looking at my parents. Your cards have been declined. There was a long pause. My mom blinked, as though she didn't understand. My dad's face turned pale, and I saw him reach into his wallet, fumbling with his credit cards. He handed them back to the waitress, but the look on his face was one of pure embarrassment. Try again, my dad said, his voice low but demanding. The waitress returned shortly, confirming what we all already knew: there was no money left on their cards. The silence at the table was deafening. All of their friends were watching. The room seemed to shrink around us. The waitress lingered, an awkward smile plastered on her face. She stood there for a moment, like she was waiting for someone to take charge of the situation. But there was nothing left to say. My dad's face turned a deep shade of red, and he shot a quick, almost desperate look at my mom. She was visibly flustered, her hands shaking as she tried to retrieve another card from her wallet. Her eyes darted around the table, looking anywhere but at me. The whole situation felt unreal. I wasn't even sure what to feel: anger, embarrassment, or pity. I stayed quiet, letting the tension simmer. Their friends at the table, who had been chatting among themselves moments ago, fell into a silence that felt like it lasted an eternity. I could hear the clink of silverware against plates in the background, the hum of conversation from other tables, but it all felt distant now, as if the world had narrowed to this one uncomfortable moment. The waitress hesitated again before speaking, almost apologetically. I'm really sorry, but it's just not going through. Do you have another card, or? My dad's hand tightened around the credit cards, his fingers trembling now. He let out a frustrated sigh and muttered something under his breath. His voice had an edge, like he was trying to regain control of a situation that had slipped beyond his grasp. He glanced at the group of friends who were still staring, their faces unreadable. Forget it, my mom snapped, waving the waitress away. We'll handle it ourselves. There was a beat of silence before my dad spoke again, his voice low but with an unmistakable edge of humiliation. Emily, this is all your fault. You think you're better than us, but this is on you. If you'd just helped us out, none of this would have happened. I felt my blood start to boil. I knew this was coming, but hearing it out loud, hearing my dad say it like it was my fault, cut deeper than I expected. I didn't respond immediately. I just sat there, trying to steady myself. My mind raced, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let them turn this around on me. Not after everything they'd said, not after the way they'd treated me. Dad, this isn't on me, I said, my voice calm but firm. You and Mom are responsible for your own actions. You both made choices, this isn't something I can fix. My dad looked at me, his face hardening. You think I don't know that? You think I don't know where I went wrong? But you think I'm supposed to just stand here and watch my wife get humiliated in front of all our friends? I glanced around the table. All their friends, people I'd known growing up, people who were part of the fabric of this town, were watching, some with discomfort on their faces, others with judgment. I wasn't sure which hurt more, my parents' words or the way their friends were quietly taking in the scene. I didn't make you live like this, I replied, my voice steady. And I'm not going to keep bailing you out. You have jobs. You have the ability to fix this. But I'm not your solution anymore. My mom's eyes flashed with something I couldn't quite place: anger, resentment, maybe a touch of regret, but she didn't say anything. She just looked at me with those wide, pleading eyes like she was trying to communicate something without speaking. I had seen that look before, many times growing up, when she wanted me to do something for her, when she wanted me to be the one to fix things. But I wasn't a kid anymore. I wasn't going to fall for it. The waitress returned a few moments later, this time with a manager in tow. The manager looked at my parents, then at me, before turning to the group of friends who were still quiet, watching the whole scene unfold. The restaurant felt suffocating, as though every eye in the place was on us. I'm afraid we can't keep the table open for you if the bill isn't paid, the manager said gently, though there was a firmness to his voice. You'll have to settle this or we'll have to ask you to leave. My dad's face turned even more red. He looked like he was about to explode, but instead, he stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Fine, he spat. We'll leave. But before he could walk away, I spoke again, this time more sharply. You don't have to leave, Dad. Just get a job. Make better choices. Maybe then you wouldn't be in this position. The words came out before I could stop them, but they were true. My dad froze, standing there in the middle of the diner with his face red and his pride shattered. The people around us went back to their meals, though I could still feel the weight of their stares. My mom finally stood up, avoiding eye contact with me as she grabbed her purse. She said nothing as she left the table, her friends trailing behind her. I stayed seated for a moment, not quite sure how I felt about what had just happened. I wasn't proud of the way things had gone down, but I also wasn't sorry. I had done what I had to do. I had stood up for myself, even when my own parents didn't believe in me or my choices. The fallout didn't come immediately, but I could feel the tension in the air for days after. My parents didn't call. They didn't text. They didn't try to apologize or even make amends. And I was okay with that, at least at first. I was still angry. I still felt the sting of their words and their actions. But as the days passed, I started to wonder if I had done the right thing. I had always been the one to help, the one to fix things, the one to put out the fires. But I was done playing that role. It was hard, though. Watching them struggle, seeing them so angry and hurt, it made me question myself. Was I wrong to not help them? Should I have just given them the money, let it go, and avoided the confrontation? I kept replaying the moment in the diner in my head, my dad's face when the waitress told him his card was declined, the way his entire world seemed to fall apart in that instant. And even though I knew I had done the right thing, I couldn't help but feel a little guilty. But then came the unexpected part. The next day, I found out from one of the people who had been at the diner that my parents' cards had been declined everywhere they tried to use them for the next few days. They didn't talk to me about it, but I knew it was happening. They had to face the consequences of their actions, and that wasn't something they were used to. The silence stretched on for a few more days. My phone stayed eerily quiet, and it was almost as if my parents had vanished from my life entirely. I didn't mind it, not at first. After the diner incident, I felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. Relief because I knew I had drawn a line, something I had never been able to do with them before. And guilt, because I had been the one to let things spiral out of control. But mostly, I was angry. Angry at the way they treated me, angry that they had used me as a crutch for so long, and angry that I had let it happen. Then, about 4 days after the dinner, I got a call from my mom. I almost didn't pick up. I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear what she had to say. I had already made it clear that I wasn't going to be their bailout anymore, and I didn't want to be guilted into changing my mind. But I figured I'd at least hear her out, so I answered the phone. My mom's voice was soft, quieter than usual. Can we talk? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. What's going on, Mom? We just wanted to say we're sorry. Your dad and I, We've been thinking about everything, she started, but I could hear the hesitation in her voice. Sorry for what? I replied, not trying to sound cold, but I couldn't stop the edge from creeping in. You still think I'm the one who should fix your mess, right? No, she quickly responded. It's not like that, Em. We're embarrassed. We've been acting like you owe us something, and that's not fair. We've been wrong, and we know it. Her words caught me off guard. My mom wasn't exactly the type to admit fault, at least not openly. I could hear the regret in her voice, but it didn't erase the years of resentment I'd been carrying. It's not just about being wrong, Mom, I said, my voice calmer now but still firm. It's about respect. You've treated me like a backup plan for too long. I'm not your safety net anymore. I have my own life to live. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her weighing her words, trying to find a way to fix things without fully confronting the reality of what had happened. I understand, Em, she said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. We'll figure things out. We're getting a second job, both of us. We're going to make it work. Good, I replied, trying to hold back the emotion threatening to spill over. I hope you do. She hesitated for a moment before adding, can we see you? Can we have dinner, just the three of us? I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted to hold on to my anger, to keep my distance, but another part of me wanted to believe they were serious about changing, about trying to make things right. I don't know, I said finally. Maybe we can talk about it later. I'll let you know. It was awkward, and that was the last time we really spoke for a while. Over the next week, I kept to myself. I focused on my work, trying to keep busy and not dwell on the mess my family had become. I knew they were trying to make changes, but I wasn't ready to just forget everything and move on. The damage had been done, and it wasn't going to be fixed overnight. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about a $900 credit card bill. This was about years of built-up expectations, of them treating me like I was responsible for their happiness and financial stability. They had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let them manipulate me into believing that I owed them something because I had a degree they didn't understand. As the days went by, I heard more from people in the town. Word had spread about the incident at the diner, about my parents' cards being declined and their subsequent struggle to pay for their meals. I didn't want to be a part of the gossip, but it seemed like the whole town knew. Some people pitied them, but most of the reactions I heard were critical. It was the kind of small-town news that stuck around for far longer than it should have. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the diner incident, I decided to stop by my parents' house. It wasn't like I was forgiving them or ready to jump back into the same dynamic, but I figured it was time to have a more serious conversation. To see if they had really made any changes. When I walked into the house, it felt different. the atmosphere was quieter than usual. My parents weren't the type to show emotions easily, but this time there was a sense of discomfort in the air. I could tell they had been trying to get their finances in order. They had started selling some of the things they didn't need, trying to downsize. The house was less cluttered, less filled with the distractions they had used to cover up their financial problems. "Hey, Em," my dad greeted me, standing up from the couch where he'd been sitting. He looked tired, like the weight of everything had finally started to hit him. He didn't look angry anymore, just defeated. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. I wasn't sure where we stood anymore, or if we ever would again. "How's it going?" "Better," my dad said, his voice quiet. "We're both working extra hours now. Things are starting to get back on track." I nodded, though part of me didn't quite believe him. It felt like too little, too late. But I also realized that they were trying, at least in their way. "You're really going to make it work?" I asked, watching my dad's face for any signs of insincerity. "We have to," he said simply. "We don't have any other choice." And that was when I realized something important. As much as I had wanted to see them suffer, as much as I had wanted to hold on to my anger, they were taking responsibility for their actions, however slowly and imperfectly. They were making the effort to fix things. And that meant something. I sat there for a long moment, absorbing my dad's words. The tension in the room had shifted just slightly. Maybe they weren't quite where they needed to be yet, but they were trying. That, I realized, was all I could ever ask for. I wasn't going to be their emotional punching bag anymore, but that didn't mean I needed to keep holding on to the anger. For the first time in a long while, I felt a small sliver of hope that things might actually get better. "Okay," I said, my voice a little softer than before. "I'm glad you're trying. But this is on you too. I won't be your backup anymore." "We get it," my dad said, his tone almost apologetic. "You've made it clear. And we're not asking for more." We sat in an uncomfortable silence for a few moments before my mom spoke up. "Maybe you could help us," she said, the words hesitant. "Not financially, just, I don't know, give us some advice? I know you're doing okay with your job, and we want to make sure we don't screw this up again." I considered her request. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about showing them how to stand on their own 2 feet, about giving them the tools to help themselves, not just the resources to survive for another week. That was something I could offer, and maybe, just maybe, it would be enough to finally break the cycle. "Sure," I said, though I wasn't sure how much I could really teach them. But the idea of helping them in a way that didn't involve my bank account felt like a small victory. The following weeks were strange. I helped my parents set up a budget, something they'd never really done before. It was basic stuff, but it was something they had to understand if they were going to stay afloat. They got second jobs, just like they promised, and slowly started to make better decisions with their finances. They even started cutting back on unnecessary expenses, things like eating out and buying clothes they didn't need. It was a slow and painful process, but it was happening. But then, about a month later, I received a text from one of my mom's friends. She had been there during the diner incident, one of the people who had watched everything unfold with my parents. Her message was short but made my stomach twist. "Hey, Emily. I just wanted to let you know that your parents' cards declined again. They're at the restaurant on Main Street. They look pretty embarrassed. You should probably call them." I didn't know whether to laugh or feel bad. Part of me wanted to pick up the phone, call them, and tell them I told them so. But then another part of me that had seen them working so hard to get things back on track, didn't want to rub it in their faces. Still, the irony wasn't lost on me. Instead of calling, I decided to head down to the restaurant myself. Not to make things worse, but because I knew there was a part of me that couldn't fully let go of everything that had happened. I needed to see them in that moment, in the midst of the discomfort and struggle they were facing, to know that they were really learning from their mistakes. When I got there, I saw them sitting at a corner booth. My mom was sitting with her hands folded on the table, looking down at the bill, while my dad was talking to the waitress. I recognized the look on his face immediately: frustration, defeat, a little bit of shame. The waitress was standing beside him, holding her tablet in one hand, and I could hear her speaking in a low voice. My dad turned to look at my mom, his face tight. "It's been declined again," he muttered. I stood back for a second, watching. The group of friends who had been there during the diner incident weren't with them this time. I could tell they were alone, and something about that struck me. Maybe it wasn't just that their cards were getting declined, but that they were finally realizing how much they had relied on others, not just me, but the people around them, for so long. The waitress was waiting patiently, and after a long moment, I saw my dad pull out a different card, more cautiously this time. He handed it to her without a word. I could see the tension in his face. He didn't know if it was going to work or not. But this time, it went through. The relief on his face was palpable. My mom smiled faintly, though it was clear they were still embarrassed. They paid the bill, and the waitress left, but I knew that wasn't the end of it. They would carry this weight with them, just like they had carried the weight of their mistakes for so long. But at least now, they were beginning to see what they needed to do to fix things. I walked up to their table, hesitating for a moment before sitting down. My parents looked up at me, their faces full of mixed emotions: shame, pride, maybe even a little hope. "Hey," I said, trying to keep things light. "How's it going?" My dad smiled weakly. It's better. We've been trying, Em. We really have." "I can see that," I said. I didn't know what else to say. I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't ready to forget everything either. I just needed them to see that they were capable of standing on their own, without me constantly picking up the pieces. And that was when I realized something important: my revenge wasn't about making them suffer. It wasn't about making them feel as small as I had felt when they dismissed my dreams. It was about forcing them to face the consequences of their actions. It was about giving them the space to make things right, but not rescuing them when they fell. They had to learn how to take responsibility, to stand up and take control of their own lives. And in the end, that was the most satisfying revenge I could have ever asked for. My mom looked at me with a soft smile. "I'm proud of you, Em. I know we haven't always been the best parents, but we're trying." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "I know you are. Just keep trying." We didn't need to say much more than that. I had made my point, and they had made theirs. Slowly, painfully, they were learning. But at that moment, I knew it was enough. As I stood up to leave, I turned back to face them one last time. "I'll be okay," I said quietly. "But you have to make sure you're okay, too." And with that, I walked out of the restaurant, feeling something close to peace for the first time in a long while. They might not have learned everything yet, but they were on their way. And that was all I could ask for.